design today. So you guys all got that handout that Ashley mentioned. We're kind of going to go through it line by line. One of the things that we decided to do with this class was to take some client examples of forms and use those for this class today. So one of the requirements was that we had to find a form that would go over kind of all the things that we wanted to go over today. So one of the form that we wound up picking was Kevin's form. So Kevin, I know you're there. I saw you logged in. He submitted a form for a request for pricing, and it kind of had all the things in it that we wanted to go over. But everybody keep in mind that whether you're using document control or not, what we do today goes with every module. Whether you're trying to modify an invoice, or you're trying to modify a purchase order or a subcontract, or if you're trying to modify document control, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Everything we're doing today will apply. So just kind of keep that in mind. And also keep in mind that you want to think out of the box as we go over things today. So we had some really good submissions for items that we weren't able to do during class, but were great ideas. So Tony, I know you're on the phone as well, and one of her submissions was basically a job record sheet. So that's something else that if we have time, we'll kind of talk about today. Or we had another client that wanted us to do a form fill for the change order module as if it was printed right on an AIA doc. So some great examples. We'll try to get to as many as we possibly can, but we're going to focus on the request for pricing because it does cover a lot of things. The most important thing about form design is learning how a form and a report works together. So every form is also part of a report. It's 2 items. So I'm going to just get to my print screen here so you guys can all see. So here's our normal print screen. So the report, not the form, but the report is what sits on the left. The form, in essence, is the header and the footer that sits around the report. So think of the report, from no matter what screen you're in, as the grid that's in from where you're printing. So that's the meat of it, the detail. The form is the presentable part that you might send off to a client or a vendor. 2 separate parts. Now, unlike reports, there are many reports in our system that we cannot modify. Forms are different. No matter what form it is, we can modify it. So we have a lot more flexibility. The other thing that I see a lot that clients do is how they get the forms to modify them. Most clients will, I would say the most common way that I see that clients get to modify forms is they go down here under Review and Reporting, and they go to Form Design. That makes sense. Looks like the easiest way to do it, and it looks like the most straightforward way. Well, it's not. The other way is over here under Reporting, same thing, Form Design. Looks like the most straightforward way, absolutely not the most straightforward way. If you do it like this, you're either starting with a blank form or you're having to open and go find the form that you want. That's a lot of work. The easiest way to work on a form is to start from the module that you want to print the form out of. 1, because the form is easier to find, and 2, because of the fact that many of the fields that you want on this form already exist. So you're not having to start from scratch and pull in job numbers or names or addresses. They should already be there, and now we're just trying to make it look the way we want our company form to look like. So that's how we're going to start today. Under Project Management, we're going to go to Document Control and Request for Proposal or Pricing. I'm going to pull up a record so we can keep looking at what it looks like. And to modify the form, we're going to start with the system form. To modify the form, you're going to click on Edit and Form Design. So this is our form design screen. It consists of a couple different areas, and I've tried to give you as much as I can in your handout because some of these things will be hard to remember, but you have 2 ways to modify this form. You have the menu bar at the top. You have the toolbar on the right, everybody can see all those tools. They do have mouse overs. I did give you a little cheat sheet of what each of them mean, but if you lose it, you certainly can do a mouse over and hover over it, and it will tell you what each of the tools are. Many of these tools here can also be accessed from the menu bar as well. The other thing that you have at the bottom is this add text field. So I'm going to see if I can highlight that so you guys can all see it. It's really, really important that you look at that. It's very easy in this report writer to think that you're in drawing a box or in a text field, and in reality you're in adding a line. And then it winds up glitching the form. So just make sure that you know what tool you're on, because what tool you're on will determine what you're going to do. Okay? The other thing you have is page format. So page format is up here under pages. Let me get my little highlighter to stop. Let me just a second. All right, so under pages you have page format, and this is where you can determine the size of the page, whether it's landscape or portrait, and what the margins are. Sometimes it's beneficial to turn a grid on so that you can see all the lines and line up, but in this case today we're going to leave that off. I'm going to jump over to the form that I already started, or the request for pricing. I've already started because we can't insert all these fields in one hour-and-a-half session, so I kind of got us started, and we're going to finish this form, and we'll talk about all the different things you can do with it. So this is the form. It does not have everything we need in here yet. It's just kind of our starting point. One of the first things we want to do is talk about inserting text fields. So our text button is this one that's already highlighted up here, if you guys can see this, add text. And in this case, I want to add an email address. So I'm going to click in here. I'm going to type in email. And now I also want to make it bold like everything else, so I'm going to right-click on it, go to Properties, and I want to get it to be bold. The other thing that we want is to be able to line these up. So if you can tell, I already kind of lined up phone and addresses, but the emails are not lined up. In previous versions, we had to line these up manually. So we don't have to do that anymore. What we can do is hold our control button down and click on multiple items. I'm just left-clicking. The last item you click is the item that is going to align things to. So now I'm going to click on my right mouse button, and we get a menu. So in this case, I want to align right. I want all my right justifications to be in line. I'm going to click Align Right, and now everything's in line. And I don't want that space in between phone and email, so I might move it up and realign. But that gives you an idea of how things line up. Now, the other thing that an insert of a text field would do would be to allow us to enter database fields. So that one button, our text button, Add Text, is not just for typing out text, but also for adding database fields. So the way you would do that is to make sure that you are on that button. And I'm sorry, I'm just checking questions here, guys. So we're going to be on our text button. We're going to click where we want the text. And then from there, we're going to click on this button over here. So everybody, make sure everybody can see this mouse over. Insert fields from a list. Now that would give us some fields that are already in this form. Another benefit to using a form that already exists, because certain things are already out here. On the top, you have all the menus that you would normally see on the left. Just because you have access to it doesn't mean you should pull it in. Okay, so We have access to GL, but just because we have access to GL doesn't mean we should pull it in. Doesn't mean there's going to find a relationship between them all. So just kind of keep that in mind. Unlike the report writer where it tells us what the relationships are and only shows us those fields, in the form design it shows us everything. We're doing a project document report or form. Doesn't mean we can pull in something from GL or payroll because there's no relationship with it. Now I'm going to pause just a minute because I see there's a bunch of questions with people not hearing it. Do we have anybody else that can't hear? You can just type it in the chat or in the question box. Or is everybody good at this point? Kim, I know you were one of the ones that was having a problem. Are you okay now? Kim still can't hear. Kim, you might want to try to dial in. If you're using your mic and speakers, you might want to try to dial in. Yeah, Kimberly King, you're in through mic and speakers, and that's probably your problem. You might want to hang up on the mic and call in, and that should solve your problem. Sometimes mic and speakers can have problems. So, Kim Garcia, I know you don't have a mic. So if you want to ask questions, you might also want to get off the speakers and call in directly. Oh, for some of you, that would be the only way that you can ask questions. All right, we're going to keep going because it looks like everybody else is okay. So what I want is not on this list. I want a vendor email. So I'm going to close out, and I'm going to show you guys how to grab a calculated field that's not on this list. We're not going to write calculated fields today. That will be for a more advanced class, but I'm going to show you some fields that a lot of you may not know even exist. So if we go to Insert, I'm going to take that back. We're going to jump over to Edit. Edit Calculated Fields. This button right here, Select Global Calculations. That button allows us to get to some pre-designed calculated fields. So I'm going to click it, and we've got this giant list of calculated fields. Now, just because they're here doesn't mean they're going to work with the report. Same thing with when we were in that other screen. There has to be a relationship. So these are agings for service receivables. Well, we're not doing anything with that, so those calculated fields would not work. But if you look, there's some calculated fields already out here for vendors. And I want to grab the vendor email. Now keep in mind, our contacts for vendors and jobs are in a grid now. So I always recommend that clients have their main contact for either a vendor or a job that they might want to pull on a report as line number 1 on your grid. So we're going to double click this, and then all we're going to do is hit Save down at the bottom. We're going to close out. Now if we click into our text box and try to add the email, so again our little Insert Data field button, and if we go to the bottom of our calculated fields, look what we got. Now if you notice, I already did that. I actually added this one for the phone number. Now I'm adding the email. I'm going to double click it. I want to line it up. So I want to line up with two things. I want to line up with the email as far as the height, so with the header. So I'm going to hold my control button down, left click, right click, align tops, and then I'm going to left click, hold my control button down, left click again, right click, align lefts. Now we're all manually aligned. None of that could be done in previous versions, so that's all newer within the last couple versions that have come out. Any questions so far on aligning? Everybody good? And Ashley, if you see someone raise their hand, just let me know.
You got it. I don't see any questions right now. I think you're good.
Okay. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a logo. Looks kind of plain without it, so we're going to get that in. And you usually, there's a couple of things with logos that we run into a lot. A lot of times a client will send me a logo and say, okay, I want to put this in my form, and I'll open it up maybe in a Microsoft product or in Paint, and it's the size of an entire page or half the page. You need to skew your logos down to the size you want outside of Sage. Now, granted, we can scroll them to be smaller, but every time you do that inside Sage 100, it will make it blurry. So the best option is, I use Paint because it's very easy to use. Open up your logo in Paint and skew it down to the size you want it on your form or letterhead, because that's the size that we need here. You want to be on your text, add a text, so we are. We're still on that button. You want to click where you're going to start putting your logo in. And you can do this from two places. You can do it from Insert Picture here, or you have a picture button over on your toolbar on the right. I'm going to click Insert Picture. Now, sometimes our computers remember this, and sometimes they don't. The picture has to be in a specific spot. It has to be on your network drive and in the BMP folder. So if you look, I'm using N because most of you guys use the M drive for what used to be Master Builder. Not all of you do, but wherever your data is sitting, that's the drive letter you want to grab. The logo needs to be inside the MP7 folder and inside the BMP folder. If it's not in that location, you may be able to see it when you do the form, but then when somebody else in the office goes to pull the form, the logo won't show up. So just make sure that's the spot that you get it in. Now, the other thing is that it has to be in a certain file format. So if you notice on the notes that I sent you, there's 3 different file formats it can be in, either a JPEG, a BMP, or a GIF format. So those are the only 3 that we'll pull in. We're going to pick this one. I turned it into a JPEG, and there's our logo. Okay. Granted, you can click on it, and if you notice, you can resize it. But if you do that, again, just be prepared that it will be blurry. Doesn't matter how high the pixel content is. It has to do with Sage's form design, that it just doesn't handle the skewing properly. The other thing you might want to do is resize fields. So we might want to resize the length of a field. So this one happens to be the job number. And if you right-click and go to Properties, you can actually change the character length. So that's really important in some form designs. I'll get a lot of phone calls that say, you know, it's cutting off my description. It's not long enough. And even though maybe you got the whole description in the data entry part of it, the form or even the report, so this would apply to if you're doing this in a report, you get the same menu, right-click on it, and you can change the length of the field. Okay? You also have some other options here. Now, it would not apply to, they happen to be on the job number here, but the format is important. So if it's a number that we're pulling up, do we want commas or not? Do we want dollar signs or not? How far out do you want to go with the pennies? Do you don't want change at all? And then if it's a date field, how do you want to see the date? So some people want to see the month spelled out. Well, there you go. That would be the one that you would pick. So just some different options of things that you can do to change the way your form looks. Now, Sandy, I'm going to unmute you because I'm going to see if we can talk about this. It's a really, really good question. And Sandy, I have you on too, so I'm not sure. I'm going to try to unmute the phone. I think that's the one you're on. And it won't let us. Let me try to. Sandy, you might have to type into the question whether you're on the phone or the mic. And if you're on the phone, I think without a PIN code, it's not going to let me unmute you. And I'll let you try to work that out with Ashley. But I'll bring up her question. Sandy's question is, what do I do if I have different logos for different companies? So the answer to that is it depends on how those companies are set up. So I see it 2 different ways. Some of my clients will have 3 or 4 or 10 different companies, and they're all in the same location. Let's just say it's the M drive. In that case, you would have a bunch of different forms. You would have, in this case, I labeled this KS and this .RFP. It happens to be the request for pricing. You would have, if you had 4 companies, 4 different forms, each with their own names on them, and the logos would all still be in the same spot. So they would still be in this location. They'd all just have a different name. If you guys set up a company in a different, each of them in a different location, then you have a little bit more flexibility. You can have maybe one form that they all look to the same, each looks to a different section. But the cleanest way would be have a different name for each company form. Now, that being the case, if you do that, just be aware that when you're here, this drop-down arrow has every single company's form, depending on what screen you're in. So each company would see the other's forms, but they can, as users, set defaults on what their default report and forms are. So you can just set printing defaults. But that's done by user, by computer. So if you have a lot of users, you'd have to go around to each user, log in as them, and set their default reports and forms for each user. But that's not uncommon to have 4 or 5, however many companies, all with different logos. Okay? We're going to get back into our form design. And our next thing that we're going to do is use some of the tools to kind of make some things stand out. So the first thing I want to do is show you where this detail box is the report. In this case, the detail of the request for pricing. When I open the standard form, and I'm going to save this, and we're going to pull up the standard form real quick. I want you to see what it looked like. So this is where I started from. And if you were to look at it, look how big this box is. In many cases, we don't need that much space. So you're going to left-click on it, and then go to one of the corners, left-click and drag, and move it to the size you want, which is exactly what I did on the other form. Now you have room down here to insert stuff. The other thing I did, and I forgot to show you guys, is when I started with this form, and it's going to apply to what you guys are doing, if you start with another form that's already here, many times there's things on here you don't want. Maybe you want some of these fields. You want the job number and their address. Maybe you don't want all this other stuff, delivery dates, or maybe you don't want these terms down here. The easiest way to delete a bunch of things is to hit this selection tool. It says select multiple objects. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to left-click and drag, and I'm going to drag down to whatever I want to delete. I'm going to let go of my left mouse button. If you notice, they all got highlighted. Now I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard. They're all gone. Now, many times when you highlight a bunch of things, the lines do not delete. So those, in many cases, have to be deleted separately. So in that case, you're just going to click. And you see how you have to get right to it, goes to the 4 corners, and left-click, and now delete on your keyboard. So that's how you're going to get rid of a bunch of stuff at once. Okay? Quick and easy way to clean some things up. Let's jump back to our request for pricing. And if anybody has any questions, just type them in the question box and we'll stop and address them. The next thing we're going to do is start talking about how to make things stand out, how to try to make this look pretty. So if you notice, I have a section here that's bold and a section that's not. Originally, when I got the example of this form, important was a part of this paragraph, but it was bolded. So one of the biggest things to understand how this works is that field properties, which include whether something is bold or italic or the size of it, is only based on what's in that field. You cannot, within one field, bold part of it or italics part of it and not the rest. They have to be within the same field. They're all going to be the same. That becomes difficult if you're trying to bold something in the middle of a paragraph. If you're bolding something in the middle of a paragraph, you now have to, let's say I was trying to bold no variances. I would have to start a text box, finish the text box, start a new text box, bold that one, and then start a new text box on allowed. Very difficult to align up. It doesn't look pretty, and in many cases what looks like aligned on the screen is not aligned when you go to print it. So my recommendation is, if you want something to stand out within a paragraph, the best thing to do is to put it in caps. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to get things aligned, which may never be exactly perfect. Okay? Or you can do what I did and maybe set something on top of it so that it still stands out. Now, one of our questions is how we save this. And the questions come up because you've seen me come in and out of forms and save them. And there is a section in your form design at the end on the handout that talks about saving. But how we save things is really important. So since we've kind of been saving some stuff, I'm going to jump back, and we're going to go back to where you guys normally would start, which is the system form, and talk about how to save it. You cannot, well, you could, but you should not, would be the better word. You should not save over any system forms. The system will let you do it, but if you do, you will lose it the second you have an update, especially a large update that addresses forms and reports. And we are getting ready to have a large update in the next few weeks. So version 19 comes up in the next 2 weeks. You guys should all be getting, anybody that's on support will all be getting emails with downloads for the next version. If you save it over the system form and you go to install 19, you just lost all your forms. What you want to do when you save it is change, let me get to my little save button. You want to change the first part. So if you look up here, the form was labeled system.rfp. You want to change the first part before the dot. I'm just going to give this alliance's name. But then you want to put the dot in, and you want to put whatever's after the dot. Very, very important. I will tell you, I get tons of phone calls that say, I don't know what to do. I've spent all this time on a report, and now I can't get to it. Well, the reason why you can't get to it is because the extension, the letters after the dot, is how our system finds it again. So if you don't mirror what the original form is, it's going to be very difficult to pull that up. Okay? Now I'm going to jump back to the form we've been working on, and then Carrie asked a question about fonts and changing them. So the system, if you are going to do a new font, the best thing to do is change it before you start anything. If you do that, anything going forward will be in that font for the form you're working on. If the field is already here, for instance, this is my accounts payable vendor name and address is already here, it won't change the existing things. I'm going to have to right-click and change it. However, if the font is not in this list, or you're trying to go below 8, you can't do it. So one of the things you're going to notice at the bottom of my handout is something that says that, unfortunately, this is not a word processing program. It does not have all the functionality that Word has. So we can't do very small fonts. We can't do italics in the middle of a sentence, or bold in the middle of a sentence, or underline in the middle of a sentence. You just have to kind of keep that in mind, that we do have some limitations. Carrie, does that answer your question? Carrie, I'm going to try to unmute you and see what you're asking, so give me just 2 seconds. In the meantime, Ashley, if you can get with Kim, I think she's having problems with her line. All right, Carrie, here goes. I'm going to unmute you. Let's see if we can hear you. Carrie, you there?
Can you hear me now?
You might have to talk up a little bit.
Okay. What it is, you guys made a custom form for us several years ago, and it worked perfectly. But in all the upgrades, it shows that the font does not exist in this particular form that we're using. And we've gone in and tried to upload it, and the font doesn't exist really much anymore in Word either. So, and it's holding up. It's holding up when we're trying to print stuff. So, is there any way to just go in and change the entire form font simply, and, well, it's already created?
Right. So here would be the way to do that. So that's a really good question. What if you just pull an existing form up that has a good font, but you want to change it? And it sounds like maybe it was designed a long time ago, and now the font's not an active font anymore. So what you can do is select multiple items at a time to change a font. So the way you would do that is this multiple selection tool, the little arrow button. You're going to left click on it, and then you might have to do it in sections, but it'll get you a lot of it at once. You're going to left click and drag and try to cover as much as you can. I couldn't really ignore, get the company address and stuff and not get the logo, so I'm going to have to do that in sections. But once you get the things highlighted that you want, you can right click, go to Properties, and change the font.
Okay.
And it will change all the things that are selected all at once. Again, you may have to do it, in chunks, but at least it's not every single individual field.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else with questions about fonts? While we're talking about fonts, just something I'm going to bring up because it's a good opening for it, and I know we have some people on the phone that have asked questions about checks. One of the fonts that's in here, let me see if I can see it, is a Micker font. So just know that we do have the ability to print Mickers on checks. So if you have blank check stock, that font does exist in here. So that would be a very good example of a form design where you're printing on blank check stock that maybe is got your security logos on it, but you want everything else to automatically print out. So we do have the ability to do that. Carrie, I'm going to go back and mute you just so that we're all muted. Anybody else have questions? I'm going to just go through our questions to make sure nobody else has problems. If you want to raise your hand, if I haven't gotten to you, just let me know. Go ahead and raise your hand. And make sure I got everyone. Kim, I'm going to let Kimberly King, I'm going to let you deal with Ashley, and she can help you kind of figure out what's going on with your recording side of it. All right. Sandy, did I get you answered as far as how to save it? Okay, good. Trying to make sure we get everybody taken care of. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is how to color boxes. So if you noticed, I colored some terms down here. Now, the original form that I have from Kevin is got a box around this. So one of the things, and I put this in your notes, it's really, really important, is you cannot draw a box around something until you put what needs to be inside the box on the form. So the box is the last thing you do, not the first. Okay. The other thing is that if you color the box and not the data fields, the color of the box will go over the top of everything else. So let me show you. This is really important because these are questions that I get from people all the time where they feel like they can't color fields in and they're just doing it the wrong way. I'm going to draw a box around the signature stuff down here. I'm also going to show you how to line those lines here in a minute, but let's draw a box. A little draw box button. I'm going to left click and just kind of drag it around where I want to have a box. Now I'm going to go back to my select tool and I'm going to click on it. I'm going to right click and go to properties. From here, I could change the background color. I have to see what, there we were. That's where I'm at. And if I click OK, watch what happens to my signature lines. They're gone. So the key to coloring areas is not coloring the box, but coloring the data fields. So I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard, and it's going to get rid of that box, because that's not what we want it to look like. What we want to do is color the field. So I'm going to color this field. I'm going to right-click, Properties, Background Color. We're going to go back to our, now look what we got. Now we got a colored-in field. And if I wanted to, I could draw a box around it. So we'll go back to our draw box, and we can draw a box around it. And now we're done. So that would be how you would do it. The problem is in this form, in the original copy of what I got, there's a box around this stuff up here, the company address and the phone number and the email. Well, and then the box is colored in. I can't do that. Because if I start coloring these fields, it's going to be, and I'm going to select multiple fields, so we're going to go through and kind of talk about what we showed Carrie a little while ago, multiple select button. If I try to color all these fields, some of these fields are longer than the other, and it's just not going to look right. So I'm going to right-click, go to Properties, and we're going to color it. Let's go back to our yellow. I'm going to click OK. It just doesn't look right. It's not consistent. So just keep that in mind, that even though we can color areas, doesn't mean that it always looks the best. It really depends on what we're trying to color. If we're just trying to color a text box, that works. But when we're trying to color in a whole section of database fields, it doesn't work well. So we're going to go back to our standard background. Okay? So maybe I'll draw a box around this, but I won't color it in. Now, the other thing that is on our example is that the email address is actually a hyperlink. That's something that we can't do. So I'm going to save this, and we're going to pull it up in the print preview. Once you save it one time with the name you've given it, you can keep overriding it. So that's what I'm doing at this point. If we look at it in the print preview, notice it's not a hyperlink. And I've tested this out several different ways. Even if you send it as a PDF, even if you email it, it will not come over as a hyperlink. Okay, so just keep that in mind. We can't quite do that yet. Maybe we'll see that come over in an update. The other thing that we can do is change the way boxes look. So maybe I'm going to click on this box. And notice how difficult this is. What I just got, there we go. The first time I tried to left click on it, I got the text box and not the actual box that I drew. We can also change line width. We can change how the line looks. That's a solid line or a dotted line. And we can change how thick the box is, even the color of the box. So even though we don't want to change the back color because it won't print properly, we certainly could change the color of the box. Maybe we don't want it black, we want it red. I don't know. The other thing that we want to do is draw lines. And I'm going to delete this line down here, and I'm going to draw a new one. And I'm going to show you some tricks on drawing lines. So the top 3 lines above here look pretty well lined up, and that's because I've done a couple things. We're going to click on our line button. And then I'm going to left click and drag and draw a line. And I'm going to eyeball it. I think it's about right, but it's not perfect. And this was definitely an issue we had in previous versions. It was very difficult to get lines to line up properly. In this version, it's a lot easier. What you want to do is go back to your selection tool and then go ahead and select the line. Before you want to select that one, though, we want to select the line that we want to align it to. We're going to left-click on it. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to go to Properties, and I'm going to look at my positioning. Where does it start? You want to write down, I'm going to write down 549. That's where the position starts. And I'm going to write down the width. Now I'm going to go to the line that I want to align. I'm going to left-click on it, right-click, Properties. I'm going to do the same thing, 549 and 140. That is the best way to align a line in this system, especially if you have multiples. Okay. And then, of course, when you save it, everything we've talked about before, make sure that you're saving it with the right extension. So .rfp, change orders or .change_prime. If you look at what the form you're starting with is, then you'll know how to save it. Again, that's the benefit of going to an existing form and modifying from there versus just going to the form design screen that starts from a blank screen. You may not be sure when or where, what the naming convention is and what you have to do to name it. Okay. The other thing that's on this form that I had some examples of was things like start dates and respond by. So I'm gonna back up just a little bit. Make sure we're saving our progress. The other thing you might want to do, as we're talking about saving before I get to our entry screen, is that if you're doing anything that's not straightforward, maybe you're trying to add a calculated field and you're not comfortable with what you did, go ahead and save your progress, but save it with a different name. So it's not unusual for a new client or a client that's not really comfortable with what they're doing in a form design to do something that really shouldn't happen. And then when you save it and you override your existing form, the form glitches because it's got something in there it shouldn't. And then you lose all your work. So anytime you're not sure about what you're doing, and we're not talking about text boxes, we're talking mainly about adding database fields. If you're not real comfortable with what you've just added, go ahead and save it with a different name and test it before you override the one that you've been working on. But I'm going to get out. I'm going to back all the way up. So one of the things that this form has on it is some start dates. So one thing that's very nice about the report writer is that if you change what a field is, the system will, in the report writer, give you the prompt of what you change the field to. So let's just say I'm going to change this prices received. I'm going to hit F7. Only the supervisor to log in can do this, but I'm going to change it from receive date to start date. Now, when I go to print this and go into form design, let's get into our form we've been working on. If I want the start date on here, I'm going to get myself a text box. So we're going to add text, kind of guesstimate where I want it. I'll move it in a little bit, but I'm going to click where I want it. I'm going to click on Insert a Field from the list. And this is where it gets a little tricky. In report design, again, it only tells you the fields you have access to, so you kind of need to know where you're going. So project management, in this case, we're in document control, and we're in request for pricing or proposal. So I'm going to open that one up, and I'm going to find my main table, which is this one. And if I scroll down, notice what this one says. It says start date. It doesn't say price received date. So this is something new to our last version or two, that as you change fields, when you go to insert them, they are now the field. The name of the field is what you changed it to in the entry screen. So keep that in mind. A lot of you guys have extra fields that you're not using, that you may want more information on your forms but don't know where to grab that data from. I'm going to go ahead and stick that in real quick. I'm going to back up to our entry screen. Anytime you feel like you want something on a form and there's nowhere in the system that you have put that information yet, look at your form. Almost all the entry screens have user-defined fields, extra user-defined fields. Look at other fields that you're not using. So if you notice, I changed the description on this one. If I hit F7, I can't change that it's a date. The system won't let me do anything with that. But I can change the type of date it is. Maybe the dates that are on here aren't the dates that I want to track. We can change them. So the same applies, Tony, with your submission. She wants to do a job report, a job record, basically, with all the pertinent information on the job on one report. Well, maybe there's not specific fields inside the database to track all that, but we probably can take some existing fields and change them. When it comes to the user-defined fields, they're different. We can change those to be whatever we want. So we can make it a character, a date, number, phone numbers, all kinds of stuff. So depending on whether you're changing an existing field or a user-defined field. But that helps a lot in form design, especially where I see those come up is in purchase orders, subcontracts, requests for pricing or transmittals and submittals, even in invoicing. If there's things that you need to put on this screen that are specific to what you're entering, you might need to change some of these fields around. Okay? I'm going to get back to my report or my form, edit form design. Now, the other thing that is on our submitted form is that we had a spot that who the plans came from. Now, I'm assuming that most of you would, if you wanted something to know who the architect was or the engineer was, you'd be tagging that in the job screen, because there is a spot to tag that. Now, that is not a field that's a predefined global calculation. So if you were to look at edit calculated fields and select globals, this is not here. It doesn't exist. If you look at all these AR ones, and for a lot of you, you may be surprised what is here, because there's a lot of stuff that people ask for that is here. But one of the things that's not here is who the architect or engineer is. Because in reality, if I tried to pull that right now, I'm going to back up. If I tried to pull that, and I'm going to click it right here, it's about where we want it on our form, and I try to insert it, this is one of the things they get a lot of phone calls on is I've inserted the field, but it's not giving me the information I want. So I'm going to go to the job screen, and I'm going to go pull this. If I pull that, it's not going to pull the architect's name. It's going to pull the architect's or engineer's phone number, not phone number, vendor number. Well, that's not what I want on my form. What I want is their name. Sometimes their name and address, especially on a bill or a subcontract. So those things we can do, but we have to do them via a calculated field, and a calculated field that has to be written. So it's not something we can pull from global. So if you have any of those where you're trying to pull something in and it's pulling in an employee number instead of a name, or a vendor number or a job number instead of names, it means there's not a direct correlation in the tables, and we have to write that correlation. So it's not unusual for a client to call and say, I've got my whole form done, and I need you to write me one SQL statement to pull this information. And we can do that for you. We can teach you to do it as well. It's a little more detailed than we can handle in this class today. But we certainly don't mind, and many times it's a great time saver and a money saver. Is you don't need us to write all the pretty things on your form, and you certainly don't need us to type in legal and all this other stuff that I have on this form behind me. But you may need us to write a field, and we certainly can do that. And usually some of those fields take 5 minutes to write. It's not long. It doesn't take very long if you understand the back end of the table. So just keep that in mind. And then on this form, I'm going to go ahead and finish it up and put in what this start date is. So I'm going to click and type in anticipated just so we can get this done, if I can spell properly. So since I'm a very bad speller, this brings up another thing that we have in our screen, is the spell check. So when you click on the spell check, which is up here, it doesn't check the spelling of the whole form. It only checks the spelling of what you're clicked onto. So we have to click into a field and then click on the spell check. Now, I did spell that right, so nothing's coming up. If I hadn't, and let's intentionally fix it so that you can see what that does, and you click on spell check. Nope. See what we're getting here. We should fix our problem. Let me do it in this text box. And I don't know, what are we going to get rid of? See if it'll do what it's supposed to do. Of course, today will be the day it doesn't work properly, and it's not. It does work, I promise you that. Usually we don't have these kind of issues, but the spell check should go out and check the spelling of the fields that you're in. And for some reason, I think it's because we have all these boxes around it. And if you notice, this is the reason why I say to do boxes last, is because it keeps selecting the box and not the text field. So let me try to get this box moved so we can get this text fixed. I literally have to move the box, click into the text field to fix what I need to fix. And then move the box down. So you might want to verify your form is what you want before you ever put a box around it. Okay. If anybody has any questions, just let me know as we keep going. So the other thing we can do is, let's take a look at what it looks like. Another thing I would tell you as an example is, don't print it from here. Don't preview it from here. Close out. Preview it from the main screen. And see what it looks like. Now, in many cases, it looks different from the print preview than it looks from as you actually print it. So you really want to not just print it to the screen, but print it to the printer. If you guys are emailing stuff, print it to PDF so that the PDF is right. You want to look at it from different places because it doesn't always print the way it looks like. If, for instance, you notice that I got all my colors missing, I should have a color around here. It'll print, but in the print preview, it's not pulling up properly. Okay, keep that in mind. All my colors were gone. So Sandy has a question that once you name a file, can you go back and rename it? The answer is yes, but not through Sage 100. So the only way to go back and name a file is to literally name it from within Windows. So you could actually be in this file. I'm just getting to where my report forms are, but make sure you're on your network drive, MB7. They all go into the report form folder. That's where it has to be so that you can pull it back up. So not only the naming convention, but the right folder. And from here, you can change the name of a form just by left-clicking, right-clicking, and renaming it. But it has to be done outside the system. So the other question that Tony has is, can you line up the address and phone number with the company name and not justify it? We can do all kinds of stuff depending on what you want. Sometimes those type of lineups may be manual. So if you notice, I've got big space between the address and the company name, and it's because this is one field. If you were to right-click on it, and this is good to know too, if you're taking an existing form and you're not sure what a field is, you can right-click and go to Properties, and you can get a good idea of, if you don't understand the tables, you can still get a good idea of what it's trying to pull. If you look, this is pulling the vendor name. So it's abbreviated, but you can tell it's the name. It's pulling address 1, address 2, and it's saying if address 2 doesn't exist, don't pull it unless it exists, so it's not giving it a space. And then the state, the city, state, and zip. So just kind of keep that in mind. Tony, I'm going to unmute you so that you can and make sure that we get your question answered. You don't have a Tony, you don't have a, I can't unmute you because of the way you dialed in. You didn't put a pin in, so I can't unmute you. But if I didn't answer your question, go ahead and type back in again for me. And then Kevin, just for you, there's a couple things that we have to do on your form to get it finalized, so you and I can talk about that after after our class is over today, and we'll get you finished up so you have a form done for requests for pricing. Before we talk about thinking out of the box and some other things that we can do with the form design, does anybody else have questions? Robin, you got your hand up, but I don't see anything typed over here, so I can't really tell what your question is. I'm going to try to unmute you and see if that works. Robin, go ahead and try to talk, and let's see if we can hear you. All right, looks like maybe your mic is not working, so you might want to just type in the question box, and we'll see if we can get your question answered. All right, Robin, I'm going to unmute you and see if that works. All right, Robin. I got two Robins. I got Robin Dawson and another Robin, so I'm going to unmute both of you guys because you both have questions. Let's see if we can hear either one of you. Go ahead, guys. Okay, so here's a question we have questions from both Robins. One is, how do you add a page? So that is in our notes, and let's talk about that. One of the submissions that we got for examples, and I'm going to get out of here, was to add a form to the back of the purchase order. In this case, a sales tax exemption form. Great idea, just not something that was going to cover everything that we need to cover today. So the way you add to the back of a form, and I'm actually going to go to purchase orders because it was a really good example, and I think it will help with what we're talking about. I'm going to go to purchase orders. We're going to go to edit form design. Now, a standard form always has a second page. In this case, it's because if the purchase order goes too long. But let's just say I want to add page 3, and it's going to be something I want to add on top of my purchase order. In this case, a sales tax exemption form that I'm going to send off with my PO. You're going to go to the last page that you want to be at, and then you want to add a page. So if you notice on your handout, there's a whole section on adding page, a good little paragraph there on how to do it. There's two options. Up here on pages, you have add a page and insert a page. So adding a page always adds a page at the end of the form. Inserting a page inserts it one page before where you're currently at. So depending on what you want to do will depend on what button you click. But in this case, I'm going to add a page at the end. So we're going to click on Add Page. If you notice down bottom, it said page 2 of 2. Now it says page 2 of 3. I'm going to scroll to the last page, and now I have a third page that I could start typing on. The other thing I see that clients sometimes want is they may have a header that's on page 1, and maybe they want it on all pages. So for instance, let's just say I wanted this. It's not very pretty, but we'll use that as our example. I wanted the purchase order header on all the pages. So before you start adding information on the additional pages, you can go to page, copy it, and then add a page, and paste it. And maybe I don't want this box. I don't want the detail box. I just want the header. So that gives you an idea on how to kind of copy things from one page to the next without having to rewrite the headers or the footers. Another good example would be a subcontract where you have a signature or an initial on the bottom of every page, and you do not want to have to type that in over and over again. maybe even a 10-page contract. In that case, you can copy the first page that you had all this stuff on it to each of the additional pages before you put the information, like the legal, on pages 4, 5, and 6. All right, so, and then Carrie has a question that says, if your form doesn't exist, is it best to use the report writer? So I still say no. So there's two things. There's a report writer and a form design. If it's a report that doesn't exist, you could use the report writer wizard. Might work. But if the form doesn't exist, I still say no. The reason why is because there's something on that form that comes from a part of the system. So for what Tony submitted to us was that she wanted a job, basically, report that shows everything that happens on the job, who the PM is, who the client is, a bunch of contact information. That's a form that doesn't exist in here, but I will tell you it's a common form that's asked for. What I would do is go to the module where most of that information exists and then modify a form from there, because that way we're not having to write fields in. We're not having to write calculated fields for everything. We maybe only have to do it for some things. So in the case of Tony's example, we would go to the job screen. I'm going to pull it over. It pulls up on my other screen. I'd go to the print button, and I'd take something from here, because don't forget that every form is tagged to a report. And a report is how the system knows which modules it's starting from. It has to know what the main tables are. And anytime you're not sure, let's just say you're starting a form, and this is a good example because it's not really a form that exists, but you need to know which tables you're using. You could always go to the Modify Report button. We're not going to modify this report at this point, but we can always go to the Modify Report button and then click on our Add a Field here. So we can insert a field here, same type of buttons. Let me create a text box. I didn't do what I told you guys to do. And these are the tables it's pulling from. So in the example of we want to print a job sheet to go on maybe the front of our files or to hand out to PMs, I'm going to go to the job screen, and now I can see all the fields and all the databases that this form is going to pull from. And now I know, okay, this is the one I want. Well, what if you can't get to the fields that you think you need? Then maybe close out of this screen, go to the next section that has information on it that you know you want to pull, and start looking that way. But I always would start with something existing because it gives you a lot less to have to do, and it also tells you what your table relationships are. The biggest, I would say, questions that I get on form and report design is people who do start from down at the report writing menus down here, because it's very difficult to understand what those relationships are, and you have to know what they are when you start. And if you don't know that, in many cases the form will not work. So you're better off starting from a menu. Now, one of the, Kimberly King asked, and this is a good question, it's something I wanted to bring up to you guys. We're talking about a tax-exempt certificate onto the PDF, onto the form. Can it be inserted as a PDF? The answer is no, but there's a caveat to that. And I had a client who came up with this idea several years ago, and I thought it was very ingenious. And many times on a form, if you can get a form that's never going to have information on it, let's say a tax-exempt certificate, or maybe some legal that's never going to change, if you can get it in Word, modify it to the way you want to look, create a picture out of it, make it a JPEG or a BMP picture out of the whole page that you want to insert, and then take that and insert that picture on page 3 in this case. Okay? That would be the best way to do that. And you can do that. You can really think outside the box of it. It could be legal. It could be a form that you just want the client to fill in. Let's just say if it's a subcontract, maybe it's a example of an AIA document or a billing document that you want the vendor to submit with their payment. Get the thing in Word, make it a picture, and insert the picture on the back end of that contract. One of the questions is, and this is from Robin, is that if you have a 3-page report, let's just say it's the purchase order that we were on, so here, and we created page 3, we modified it. I didn't say what I did, but we create a 3rd page, and if there's nothing on the 2nd page, will the 2nd page print? And the answer is no. The reason why it's no is because this 2nd page has a detail box on it. So the detail box, any page has a detail box, it's a secondary page, will print either a 2nd page or a 3rd page or a 4th page if the detail exists. If the detail does not exist, that page will not print. So it's okay if you have a 2nd page with the detail on it and you move on to page 3, 4, and 5. The detail, if it fits on one page, it will skip that in-between page. And then, Tony, there isn't any tax-exempt forms in Master Builder. I really think for you, we might want to take the top half and the bottom half of that tax-exempt form, put it in Word and make some pictures, and the middle part of that tax-exempt form that you do fill in vendor information that that's the stuff we pull from the database. And when we're done with our session today, if you want, we can talk about yours in detail because I have a couple ideas of how to get around some of the issues that you're having. Anybody else have questions?
Christine, I see that Steve Tremblay has a question.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you answered it. It says he tried to put his logo on the balance sheet and income statement, and it didn't work. There were pictures of buildings where they wanted their logo to go, and they tried to override it, but it did not work.
All right, I don't think Steve has a microphone. So, Steve, we might have to talk about it offline, but usually what causes that problem is 2 things. So he's having an issue with logos. It's not unusual to have an issue with logos. If you go to the help screen and look at adding a logo, it literally tells you to override the logo in the report forms folder. If you do that, 1, your logo is going to be the size of the houses. You don't want that. 2, it could be looking to the C drive instead of the network drive, and it can mess up the logo. So in reality, you want to do logos 1 report or form at a time. I know that's time consuming, but it's the only way to get them accurate. And they have to be in that convention that we talked about. So if you remember, when I said I want to insert a picture, it's going to my CMB7 BMP folder. That's not where I want it. My company is on my M drive. So just keep that in mind. You have to be on your network drive, in the MB7 folder, in the BMP folder, and it has to be in here. And it has to be named something other than logo. If you notice what I did with KS Construction's logo. Okay, so that's probably what's causing the problem. If Steve, if you try those things and you still can't get the logo to pull up, let me know, and we'll have a quick little 15-minute session, and we'll try to get your logo on your form. But normally, the reason that causes those problems is because the logo is pointing to the C drive instead of the network drive, and it's also not in the right spot. Yeah, I just see what you said. Yours is named logo. That is what the help screen says. And I've been doing this for almost 14 years, and all those 14 years I've probably had, couldn't even count on one hand the name of clients that had a logo the size of these houses that was able to just change the name of their logo to say logo and make it work. It just doesn't work well. So that's usually what causes the problem. Anybody else with questions? Beatrice has a question. Yeah, Beatrice, I'm gonna try to unmute you and see if we can let you ask about certified payroll. You're on mic, so you may have to type it. Let's see what happens. I'm gonna try to unmute and let's see if your mic works. Beatrice, go ahead.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yep.
Okay. The question I had on the certified payroll form, on the one that where it actually brings in the information from your reports, and you can type in the classification, the job classification, it doesn't always fit. And I have quite a few projects where they want me to put, for example, excavator operator over 50,000 pounds. But I can't fit all of it. It carries in to the next column instead of wrapping around. And I don't know if there's a way to change that. And it would be number 11.
So you're doing these. So you're
yeah, because I would rather do those because those make it easier because I don't have to make as many. It lets me edit the deductions because I also have to have the deductions labeled, but I can't type out the whole classification, job classification.
And Beatrice, what state are you in?
In Texas.
You're in Texas. I'll have to look. Actually, if you can, I don't know if you have access to it. If not, I can get with her later. See if you can find the version 19 release notes. Version 19, which comes out in the next 2 weeks, has some updated certified payroll forms. I just don't remember if Texas is one of them.
Oh, okay.
And unfortunately, the that form comes out of Atrix. So if you guys, anybody that's doing certified payroll, our old certified payroll was 516. Now most of us use 5111, and it integrates with Atrix. And unfortunately, there's nothing we can do to change that form because that's all generated from Atrix.
Oh, okay, makes sense. Because I do use the 516. I use that, but then I use it just to get the data, and then I do it on the actual Department of Labor forms because it is hard to fit everything.
Exactly. Now, how many jobs are we talking? We're talking about a lot of jobs or just a couple?
I have a few because I have probably about 3 or 4 where they want to see excavator operator. Because at first I was just summarizing it so it could fit, and then it got kicked back to me saying that they needed to see the job classification as it was described on their wage scale. And some of them, like the labor one, it was fine because common labor fits. But for example, I have some supervisors and they want me to put superintendent of common labor. That doesn't fit in that DOL one, in the number 11.
Here's another idea, and this applies for a lot of you guys. I see things happen a lot where somebody's creating an invoice, in this case certified payroll, where they want to type a one-time note or they need to just make a small modification. They can't really do a form design or don't want to do a form design change. In this case, we can't. If you were to do the other one, if you were to do 516 instead, every report in here goes to Word and Excel. Now, when it comes to Excel, it doesn't look very pretty. But I will tell you that it almost comes over perfectly when it goes into Word, and then you can make changes from there, especially if you're just talking about headers and trying to change how it's presenting.
I can add remarks. Because, see, the problem with the 516 for me is that they want the remarks. Correct. Yep. But if I put it into Word, I can add remarks?
Uh-huh.
Okay, then that's what I'll do. Because that'll save me so much time. Okay.
It's a little tricky. You have to kind of get used to it because it pulls everything over as like table boxes. So if you're familiar with how you would do that in Word when you insert tables, it pulls over everything, every field as a separate table box. So you have to get comfortable with how to modify that table box. But as soon as you get comfortable with that, it's very easy to just click into a field and modify what the description is, and you can just do that. That would be my best suggestion.
Yeah, because I have to retype everything, and then not all our guys stay at the same job site. So I have different guys going to these job sites, and I have to put in all their information, just start over every time instead of just running one simple report. So I'm going to try that.
Yeah, try that. See what happens with that. That might help.
Okay, cool. Okay.
So Robin has a question on, are we going to offer a report writing class that includes calculated fields? And the answer is yes. That is going to be part of our report writing, not the form class, but the report writing class. And when you write calculated fields in the report, you would write them exactly the same way when you write them in the form. So that will apply whether you're writing that field in either one. And it's just we just don't have enough time. We would probably take an hour just to talk about how to write calculated fields. So that's why we didn't really address that today. But for now, if you guys have a calculated field that you want, you have a couple options. One, look at the global calculations. See if it's there, because there's a lot of things that are there that people do not realize that are there. The other trick is go to another report that might have that calculation already. So I'll give you a good example. In Kevin's submission for his request for pricing is he wants to tag the name of the architect. Well, I happen to know that there is already a report in here that has that calculated field. Happens to be in the progress bill. So if I was to go there, just a quick little trick of the trade, and I'm going to try to figure out which one it's in. I'm pretty sure it's in this AIA form fill. I'm going to go to Edit, Form Design. Look, it's right here. There's the architect's name. If I go to Edit, Calculated Fields, hit the drop-down list of what's already created, and that's not it. Let me see if I can get to it. There's a couple different ones here. Okay, there it is. I can, from here, take a field that's on another form and save it to Global Calculations. And you can go into the form that you're using, click on the Global Calculations button, and it will be there. So that's a good way to, even if you're not quite comfortable with writing calculated fields, if you know that that field exists on another report, go to that form, that report, save it to Global, and go back to where you need it and pull it in from Global. Okay. So a quick, easy way to at least get to some different calculations. Sandy, did we answer your question? I'm not sure if we got you or not. I'm going to try to unmute you. Sandy, did we get you? Can you hear me? I unmuted you, but I'm not sure if we can hear you. All right, sounds like we got you. So Robin asked, do the relationships in the tables come into play when you're saving global calculations? And the answer is yes. In this case, I'm saving a global calculation that's on the progress bill, and I happen to know that the progress bill starts from the job tables. And on the request for pricing, it's also linked to the job table, so I'm okay copying a relationship from a progress bill to a request for pricing. However, that being said, if I try to grab a calculation that maybe would come from payroll or some other obscure spot and try to put it into a request for pricing table or form, it's not going to work. So this is one of those examples. If you try this and you insert it into your form, save your form with a different name so that if you glitch it, you don't lose all your work. You just lose adding that field to that form. And Stephanie, you have a very good question that a lot of people ask. She's asking, can you format check stubs? And the answer is yes and no. So I'm going to go into, so I know there's a couple people on the phone that have actually asked this question. I'm going to go into paychecks. It's the easiest one I can get to. But you can go into edit form design, and you can edit everything except what's in the gray box. The gray box happens to be a report that is a lockdown report that we can't get to. So we had, this client is on the phone, so she knows what I'm talking about. We had a client that she wanted us to change some of these boxes up here, and we could. For salary people, we didn't want to put hours in. But we also wanted to change it within the gray box, and we couldn't because it's locked down. There's no modify report button. So we can do some things, but not all others. Okay. And Kim, I'm not sure what you're asking about Sage's client ID being displayed. I'm not sure what you're looking at. All right, and Sandy's asking about the memo line and checks. So most of our checks, when we print them, we see, the pre-printed forms have memo lines. The only form that's in our system currently that prints on the memo line is the GL check. So if you were to look at that, I'm going to edit this check. See that right there, memo and description. So the GL check has it. The problem with the AP check putting it there is what is it going to put? It doesn't know what to put. It's paying multiple invoices, and it really wouldn't know what to pull, so it's not there. But I will have clients that say, well, you know, if I'm paying the phone bill or the electric bill or American Express or anybody that has an account number and I want to put the account number on the check, that's where I'd want to put it. I'd want to put it I want to put it in the memo line. And in those cases, we can add that. So that would be what we could put on the memo line. Can we put job names or dates or months? No, because that would be in the detail of the check stub, not on the memo line. Because it's don't forget, the check is paying, if you're doing it in AP, the check is paying multiple invoices. So what if your check's paying 3 jobs? It would not be able to put that in the memo. And even if you were only paying 1 job, the system would have no way to write that. So we're looking at putting things on the memo that only have to do with maybe the vendor specifically and not the invoices that it's paying. So an account number, anything like that that might be in the vendor card, we could add it. And all you would do is, let's see if we can get to an AP check table. So one of our new things with these newer versions is you cannot get to the AP check unless you have some vendors selected to pay. We do. So again, figure out which check you're using. A lot of people have started with 11B or D, but you should have your names on them now. Edit form design, and you certainly can, right where the memo is, create a text box, insert a field from a list, and again, you have to kind of understand the relationship. So I couldn't pull something from GL or payroll here. I'd have to pull something from the vendor, and I could pull in their account number. And you're just going to have to test it and print it on blank paper and make sure it lines up. But that's how you could put in something on the memo field. But if you notice, the box, the gray box, is already grabbing check dates, vendor names, invoice numbers, that type of thing. Okay. Anybody else with questions? Have we missed anybody? I'm going to go through the raised hand thing again and just make sure I haven't forgotten anybody. Looks like everybody's good. So just some kind of follow-up things while we're waiting for anybody to type in questions. Is that, one, if you need help, you're welcome to give us a call. We do appointments as short as 15 minutes, so sometimes it's just something quick. In fact, I think if Steve doesn't have his logo fixed, it's probably a quick 15-minute fix. So if you need help, you're certainly welcome to give us a buzz. If you're really struggling with form design, or it's just not, you understand it, but it's just not doing what you want to do. You want it to do more what Word does. And you want to have a nice, big, long, let's say, subcontract form, or maybe a nice proposal that has lots and lots of legal on it, and you just can't get it to look the way you want. Know that we do have some Word integration tools where the form is actually written in Word and pulls the database fields into Word, so it works a little bit differently than the form design. So if you're interested in that, you can give us a buzz. And then, of course, we are going to have a report writing class in the next couple months. You'll see that email go out, and we will deal with more detailed writing some calculated fields and kind of how the relationships work in the report writing class. So, and Tony, for you, we don't really do advanced form design because not too many people want it, but we can do that one-on-one. And the best way to do that is, let's pick the form you want, whether it's the maybe you want to do your job record form, and you learn how to do that and create your form all at once. And so you're getting 2 benefits. You're getting a report or a form out of it, and you're also learning kind of how to do some advanced stuff. So that's something we can do, and I'll make sure I follow up with you on that. And it's a little too detailed to do in a big class because we've got over 30 people today. It's a little more hands-on than a big class. Anybody else with questions?
I guess one of the questions that I had was, but I don't know if it'll cover in here or in that report writing class that you're talking about, but if I enter information, detailed information in the vendor invoices, is there a way to pull that information to be able to generate or prepare other reports? Like, for example, we have a fuel tax report that we prepare. And so I've started entering things detailed in hopes that once I figure this software out, maybe I can pull the amount of gallons that we're buying in dyed diesel or clear diesel.
Gotcha. Okay, so I have actually another client that deals with dyed diesel, so I'm familiar with what you're talking about. We can't do it on the check, obviously. The check form is kind of locked up, but we certainly can do it in a report.
Oh,
if
okay.
you're talking about pulling a payable report, and this goes for almost anybody, whether it's payables or receivables, if it's in the screen, I can get it for you on a report.
Oh, okay, okay.
So if you've put it here and you're tracking, you know, gallons of dyed diesel or whatever it might be, we might want to do parts for them so that we can pull out just the specific parts and not every single line of every AP invoice, because a lot of them won't apply.
Mm-hmm.
But we certainly can get you that information so that you can then report and pay tax on it.
Oh, okay. And is that something you'll cover in that report writing class? Or is it better just to kind of call and be like, okay, this is what I'm trying to do?
For you, because it's so specific, I'd say we'd almost be better off setting an appointment and kind of figuring out exactly what you need. But we will cover that stuff in a report writing class. What you're saying, though, is more, it's not just report writing. We also have to talk about some setup things to make sure that you guys got the system set up so that we can get the output the way you want it.
Right.
In this case, we need some of payable stuff to come out into report and other parts of it not.
Okay.
So we could talk about some different ways to do that. Maybe we use that use tax button. Maybe we use parts. It kind of depends on how much information we got to pull out. But that's definitely something that we need to talk about so that we can make sure that if you're entering it right, so that we can pull it out the way you need it.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
Okay. And who am I talking to?
It's Beatrice.
Beatrix, that's what I thought. Okay. I'm going to follow up with you, and we can kind of make sure that you got that yourself set up right, because I know that you have a lot of dyed diesel that you have to report on.
Well, not a lot, but it's every quarter, and so I always have to go to my actual invoices. Sorry about that.
You don't want to have to pull every single invoice.
Yeah, and so what I've been doing when I started working here is I started putting the detailed, because I was hoping that once I figured out the software, I can get that information somehow, because I noticed how you can design reports and stuff like that. But
yeah, and we can talk about how to make sure you're entering it the right way so that you get it out easily. It will all be there, what you've done so far, but is it the most efficient way to get the report right? I won't know until I look at it, but if it's in the screen, we can get it.
Okay, no, that'll work. And then if not, as long as I know, then we can go forward. We can input it a certain way so that we can get what we need.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Anybody else with questions?
Christine, I do see another question from Tony. Can we add the phase to the AP check? I'm not sure if you do.
Unfortunately, no. The phases, and when I'm implementing a client, I will tell them if they're new to be very careful with phases, because phases, although very useful, automatically require normally a good amount of report writing. So there's a lot of the standard reports do not include the phase. The check will not include the phase. However, there is a report that we can modify. Let me see if I can find it. So this would be good for anybody else that wants to modify the check form, which we can't do. This is a good way to get that information. So this is in 2 spots, and I never remember which one this is, so give me just a second. It's this one. So this payment invoice details, that actually shows everything that's on a check or checks, and we can modify that. So if you notice, there's a modify button, and we can add to this. So I can't want to get into report writing at this point, but we certainly could add the phase on this. So for Tony, the thing for you is that I would use this report this vendor payment, this invoice details report, modify it, and then this transaction number is actually the check number. So you could type in the check number and print a report that you could then tag with the check. You put it in with the check. That's how I would do that. And this form is, that report is modifiable. And the other thing you asked, Tony, was if we change something on the form, does it change for anyone else? I'm going to answer that question based on what's happening in version 19. In version 18 and below, when you changed a form, as long as you saved it on the network drive, so we'll just keep using M as our example, everybody has access to it. As soon as we go to 19, which is in the next couple weeks as you guys start updating to the new version, that changes. When you save a form and or a report, you have the ability to make it just for something that you see, which then saves to your C drive, or something that everybody has access to. So we have a little bit more flexibility going forward. Okay, so our next thing is user-defined, and can we add more user-defined fields? Unfortunately, we can't. That's when we start looking at some of the fields that we're not using and seeing if we can take a different field that already has a name on it and use it for what we need to use it for. So it's possible that you have another field that's already purposed for something else, but you're not using that field, and maybe we'll repurpose it for what you need it for. But unfortunately, the user-defines are part of programming, so we only have pretty much in every screen 2 user-defined fields. And that's all we get. Anybody else with questions? Ashley, if you see anybody else, let me know.
I don't for right now.
And we will try to send the recording out. Hopefully GoToMeeting has not had any issues with the recording. You do have your form design handout. And then, again, if I'm going to follow up with a couple of you guys, and Kevin, I'll follow up with you to finish out your form. But, you know, a couple of you other guys that have some issues, we'll follow up with you directly, and we'll see if we can get some of your concerns fixed.
And if you have any questions or need anything at all, please contact Alliance, contact Christine. We're here to help you.
And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but